Next up we have Kerry Worsnop.
Kia ora everybody. Okay. Do you want my PPR?
No.
Okay, all good. I
No,
won't.
just go.
So my sector. I'll start first of all. I'm Kerry Worsnop. I'm a sheep and beef farmer, originally born in Rotorua. I moved here out of school. My first job was on the coast, and basically ever since then that has felt like my home. My sector is the sheep and beef industry, which, as most of you will be aware, is the dominant land use in the region by a mile. About 360,000 hectares of the region is in sheep and beef land. It was primarily all taken out of either fernland, scrub, or native trees within the last probably 130, 40 years. Some a little bit before that, but not a lot. And a big reason why that land was taken out was that the government of the day thought that we all should develop New Zealand and become more prosperous, and a way that they saw that that should happen was that we would develop farms and we would sell things to the world to pay for our development, pay for our roads, pay for towns and things that obviously weren't here previously. So the sector that evolved over time has changed a lot. Pretty much unrecognisably, to be honest. In its early years, New Zealand had a lot of speculative buyers who bought huge tracts of land from overseas, like massive tracts. The area west of Gisborne at one point had 4 major owners who owned incredible amounts of land, but they didn't actually farm it, they just held it. They bought it often off banks who had mortgaged the Māori landowners before them. So we have a painful past in some ways in terms of how this land ended up freeholded. But the government at the end of the 1800s basically said, well, we don't think that these massive landowners are very good for New Zealand. So they forced the breakup of a lot of those farms. And that happened over a period really that didn't stop until after World War II, where the land was parcelled up, and the intention, the government actually essentially gave cheap loans and paid for things like development and land clearing so that people would come and develop the land and create local economies, build towns around them, etc. By the end of roughly the 80s, the government funding of this, which was enormous by the way, at one point it was about a third of New Zealand government's expenditure, was being spent essentially supporting and developing New Zealand farms. The reason we have a highly developed agricultural sector in New Zealand is because as an entire country for 100 years, that was what we focused on building. And we built it. We are now probably one of the leading agricultural producers in the world because as a whole country, that's what we put our energy into. But by the 80s, that system of funding collectively, the agriculture sector had run out of room. We were actually losing money, we were losing our productivity, and our farmers were wards of the state. We basically asked the government for money instead of our markets. So the government deregulated and it said, no, you're on your own. Out there guys, go and make your own money, sell to the world. And the farms that we have now are essentially the ones that survived that massive change. So if you could not make your own money by becoming more efficient and by developing ways of producing sheep meat and cattle meat from whatever land you had access to, you weren't a farmer anymore. You had to leave and do something else. So obviously that happened roughly around the time of Bowler. And of course, farming was pretty dire in the years after subsidies were removed. And Bowler was really the nail in the coffin for a lot of East Coast farms. A lot of people walked off in a nutshell. They saw the subsidies that were offered for forestry. They knew that they weren't really able to see any light at the end of the tunnel, and they sold. The Martin Road's a great example, where within 5 years, virtually every farm on that road sold in quick succession. The land that stayed in farmland was generally thought to be basically people could see a way through. They could see a way to farm through bola. They could see a way to try and remediate the damage that happened. And so the sector that I came into 20 years ago had already spent quite a bit of time planting willows and poplars, especially under the East Coast Deforestation Scheme. It uses the land in a way to the second, probably the third question a little bit. We use the land essentially for grazing livestock at an extensive scale. So globally, if you look at how meat is produced, it's not produced the way we produce it. It's typically produced in a housed system where they will grow grain on huge areas, they will harvest the grain, take it in, feed it to animals that are in a large, or actually massive barn. We don't do that. We put fences up and we say, look, basically help yourselves, guys. And when you finish the grass there, we'll move it here and you help yourselves again. It's probably the lowest impact, lowest input is the better word. It's the lowest input land use that New Zealand has, with the exception probably of carbon farming and in some cases forestry. Because the inputs that you use are very minimal. There's not really any need in a pastoral system for a pesticide. You're essentially using grasses that are just growing naturally. You can augment that with more nutrients, but as you've heard from the Parkers, we have incredibly fertile land in this region. There are many people who do still farm land in this region with no fertiliser at all, which is unheard of in many other areas in New Zealand. We have a really, really fantastic growing climate, which is part of why those farmers post-Bola who looked around and saw complete chaos didn't give up. Because, and I can attest to this, because our farm got smashed. We have 2 blocks, and we looked around after up the coast. It was actually after the storm, the April storm a year before Gabriel, and it was worse than Bola at that time. And then, of course, there was Gabriel and hail, and then the June storms as well. And you could look around and think, oh my God, how will you come back from that? But then, what are we now? We're 2 years past that, and most of the slips are grassed over. Most of the interventions that you put in place to kind of get your infrastructure back up and running, they're actually within your capacity to adapt to. And so in the way that farming kind of has an adaptive capacity that you see what's happened and you can respond to it. And I think the major thing that we can do going forward is to look at what we've done in the past and learn from it. Because every season, we all have as farmers maybe 40 chances in our lifetime as farmers. Every year you get a new season, and that season's another chance to do better. It's a chance to improve on what you had last year. And over 50 years, you should have come a long, long, long way. So I'm 20 years in, and I can say the way I farm now, it's really different to what it was 20 years ago. And in 20 years from now, it'll probably be really different to what it is now. Every year we try and adapt to what nature's telling us, to what markets are telling us, and to what resources we have available. I think what we need to do going forward, and I spent a year studying this in terms of trying to understand how agricultural policy can work better in the land-based environment. People who live on the land care about it. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to live on a farm. If you live in a rural village, you care about what's happening around you. People who are close to the effect care about the cause. Give them more accountability and more responsibility for solutions, because high-level policy responses are almost always going to blow up with a different problem somewhere else. We saw that with the blue line, where we just said, hey, half the coast needs to go into forestry. If that had been the decision of people who were in those communities, they would have picked and chose what they did on each parcel of land. They would probably have done very little blanket planting. But we need to make those decisions more local to the people who are affected by them. And as people on the land, sheep and beef farmers are about as close as you'll get. They can tell you right down to the slip what impact the cyclone has had on them, because they walk it every day. They see it more than anyone sees it. So yeah, my take-home message would be, take the learning. We have a lot of it, we need to use it.